Once upon a time in a faraway land. How to snatch from the sovereign American people their liberty and place them under the discretionary power of the executive that we control, says one Bank of England goldsmith bankster to the other. Change the legal meaning of the word they use to describe the territory in which they enjoy their sovereignty, state, to mean territory that we control via our hirelings in Congress, says the other in response. But do it during wartime, an internal war that we create, so no one will notice. Thereafter, when they see that particular word in a legislative act, they will think it means the one thing, when legally it means the other, as defined by us. And we can impose our will on them through our servants on Capitol Hill and get away with it, because of the American people's foolish, trusting nature. Not everyone will buy it. We need to get them all to enter a binding contract without knowing it, and from which there is no apparent escape. And the contract should rescue them from something, so they are predisposed to agree to whatever we offer. To begin with, why not give them loans of easy credit through the banking monopoly we institute, and persuade them to borrow and purchase stock in the stock market, because everyone knows the stock market is going up. It costs us nothing to do so, and we can secure the loans with their land and property, and then crash the stock market, contract the availability of credit so the economy dives into a depression, and foreclose and evict them from their farms and homes and toss them out on the street, just like we did in ancient Rome, the second replies. Most excellent, says the first. Then we can pretend to save them from potential financial destitution through what appears to be a personal retirement program, for which they need to apply, of course, but is actually a government franchise, with political rights and duties, the right to receive, but not realize, retirement benefits, and the duty to pay income tax and payroll taxes for the retirement of other franchisees and administration of the program, which our puppets in Congress legislate into existence under local powers of legislation of the Corporate District of Columbia, domiciled in territory over which they exercise absolute, exclusive, personal legislative jurisdiction, thereby establishing the franchisee's residence for legal purposes in the District of Columbia, and making them subjects of all legislation therein, and nullifying and defeating the provisions of their supreme legislative instrument, the Declaration of Independence, whereby we effectively usurp their liberty without them even knowing what happened, he says in conclusion. First, some history about the culprits. Oliver Cromwell is the British trader in the employ of the goldsmith banksters of the private Bank of Amsterdam, who covet control of the British throne to create the Bank of England and want revolution. With unlimited finance for the best of arms and a horde of mercenaries and trained revolutionaries at his disposal, Cromwell assumes the powers of tyranny and augments the English Revolution and plots and carries out the death of the British King Charles I to make way for the Amsterdam goldsmith bankster's Dutch proxy and king-elect, William III of Orange. With an undeterminable amount of abstract money, ledger, credit, page entry, or paper notes available from goldsmith bankers' costless loan process, fractional reserve lending, as sanctioned by the new British King William III with arrival of the private Bank of England in 1694, The British people swell with national pride as the English navy conquers the world by force of arms, and Britannia rules the waves, at the pleasure of the goldsmith banksters, but expense of Britons who, under the personal legislative jurisdiction of Parliament, pay increasingly heavy taxes that allow the goldsmith banksters to conceal that the private Bank of England does not loan actual money, gold or silver coins, to the British people, only inflationary, valueless bookkeeping entries of digits in the account of a borrower. Just 32 short years after institution of the Amsterdam Goldsmith Banksters' new private Bank of England, we get the classic proverb about death and taxes. Things as certain as death and taxes can be more firmly believed. Not too long thereafter, 1799, the Goldsmith Banksters effectuate their dream of a personal income tax on the Englishmen who borrow the digits they loan, whereupon reality debunks delusion, and even though Britannia may rule the waves, Britons will always be wage slaves. When the United States of America hits the scene July 4, 1776, and thereafter, American residents of the several Union states, as constituent members of the supreme political authority of the American Republic, enjoy the unalienable rights of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, free of the personal jurisdiction of their servants in Congress and respective Union state legislature, and are the subject of no legislative statute, and they know it. For roughly the next 175 years, there is no such thing as a law enforcement officer, only peace officers, and Americans living throughout the Union enjoyed lives free of molestation by their servants in government. The term law enforcement officer, an abbreviation of statutory law enforcement officer, will not begin to appear in law dictionaries until the 1950s. On June 30, 1864, Congress, as personal agents of the Goldsmith Banksters of the private Bank of England, plant the innocuous statutory seed that ultimately, effectively erases all the aforesaid unalienable rights and places firmly under the personal legislative jurisdiction of Congress the American people. This single fraudulent act is the cause of the condition of the world today, a product directly attributable to the practice of usury and fractional reserve lending, worldwide poverty, corporatization of the food supply, secularization of nations, demonizing of religion, destruction of the environment, erosion of morals, etc., facilitated by Congress's pledge of full faith and credit to pay interest, primarily with personal income taxes collected from the former sovereign American people, now wage slaves, on an undeterminable amount of abstract money, ledger credit page entry, or paper notes, created by the self-same Goldsmith bankers now ensconced in their new command post, the Federal Reserve, for the military conquest of Earth by their personal hitmen, the U.S. war machine. The Federal Reserve Act is enacted in late 1913, and Federal Reserve notes began hitting the streets in 1916. At that time, the main focus of the Goldsmith Banksters is implementation of the personal income tax to keep the effects of inflation in an acceptable range, so it is not a cause for alarm among victims of the swindle. A barrage of income tax legislation on the heels of the 16th Amendment keeps the American people agitated from the shock that, for the first time in history, Congress is claiming legislative power and jurisdiction over their personal lives, liberty, and property. Article 1, Section 8, Clause 17, and Article 4, Section 3, Clause 2, the Territorial Clause of the Constitution provide, respectively and in pertinent part, the Congress shall have power to exercise exclusive legislation over such district as may become the seat of the government of the United States, and like authority over all places purchased for the erection of forts, magazines, arsenals, dockyards, and other needful buildings. The Congress shall have power to dispose of and make all needful rules and regulations respecting the territory or other property belonging to the United States. Upon establishment of the District of Territory comprising the seat of the government of the United States, later known as the District of Columbia, as provided in Article 1, Section 8, Clause 17 of the Constitution, and referenced impliedly in Article 4, Section 3, Clause 2 thereof, Congress, for the first time in history, have defined territory by the name of the District of Columbia, over which they exercise exclusive territorial legislative power, and residents, i.e., inhabitants of the District of Columbia, over whom they exercise exclusive personal legislative power via the consent of said inhabitants. The species of legislative power limited as to its objects but extending all over the Union is known as subject matter jurisdiction. The other, an absolute exclusive legislative power over the District of Columbia, is plenary, and includes, in addition to the subject matter jurisdiction, territorial and personal jurisdiction.